It's an unusual idea. Imagine being able to cap your population, like literally decide that it won't get any bigger. Well, that idea is being considered in Switzerland right now. In fact, people there are voting on it this weekend in a referendum proposed by the right-wing Swiss People's Party, the country's largest political grouping. What it all boils down to is a simple question. Is 10 million people too many for Switzerland? But beneath that is a much bigger issue that many countries are grappling with. And that is, how does a wealthy nation balance the tension between an ageing population, pressures on infrastructure and housing, and concerns over migration? Well, this is the trend driving the debate. Switzerland's population has climbed from just over 7 million people in 2002 to more than 9 million today. Official projections suggest that the 10 million mark could be reached in the early 2040s, although some supporters of the initiative believe it could happen sooner than that. Unlike many migration debates elsewhere in Europe, this one is largely about Europeans moving within Europe. Most immigrants to Switzerland come from neighbouring countries like Germany, France and Italy, as well as Portugal, filling jobs across the economy. If the proposal passes, the government would be first required to tighten immigration rules once the population reaches 9.5 million. If Switzerland later reaches 10 million people, authorities would have to take all available measures to keep the population below that limit. And if those measures failed, then the country could ultimately be forced to end its free movement agreement with the European Union. So it's set to be a tight vote and some potential far-reaching consequences, which I'm going to talk about with economist Andreas Beerli with the Swiss Economic Institute in Zurich. Andreas, Switzerland is one of Europe's wealthiest countries. It's got low unemployment and a strong economy. Tell us why immigration has become such a politically powerful issue there.
To be honest, it has always been. It's always been an important thing that for people, immigration has always been relatively high to Switzerland, and like every other year, we're gonna have a referendum about like a vote or about curbing immigration and halting immigration from the European Union. So that's it's not a new thing. It's like something that is reoccurring every other year, I would say.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Now, supporters of this proposal, they're arguing that population growth is putting pressure on housing, transport and public services. To what extent are those concerns backed by evidence, and to what extent is immigration being blamed for problems that might have other roots?
Yeah, I mean, the question is a bit more complex, or like the situation in general. What we have seen is like we have seen quite some immigration, as you were showing before, since Switzerland joined the European Union. So that's clear. And also we are seeing pressure on the housing market. It's hard to get a flat in Zurich or in Geneva or in other big places, which also has to do with missed reforms of the housing market and like an encouragement to build new apartments, and that certainly also the policy side has to be blamed for this. It's not just immigration, and so these are really the two sides that when it comes to the pressure of immigration, and of course we cannot deny it. There has been a lot of immigration coming to Switzerland, and maybe not all of the facilities and public services kept up with it.
Andreas, many countries limit immigration. No country's ever voted to limit its own population. Let's hear, firstly, from some people from the hard-right Swiss People's Party whose idea this was, and then we'll come back to you.
Ultimately, what we want is to protect what we love, to ensure that Switzerland remains a wonderful place to live in. We're not going to eliminate traffic jams overnight, but this will allow us to adapt road and rail infrastructure and build housing, but not at a pace that would ultimately prevent us from absorbing this massive influx of people.
The goal of my involvement in this initiative is to limit the number of people entering Switzerland each year. We have about 100,000 people entering the country. Our infrastructure and the country itself cannot simply expand indefinitely. We're not going to be able to build on top of the Matterhorn, so we're just pouring more and more concrete. And that's what worries me most when it comes to our farmland.
You can see that these big cities are booming. In Romont and Beerli, the population is currently exploding. I hear this a lot from my colleagues. I have a colleague my age who is losing his entire farm because it's going to be built over.
Andreas, Beerli, these people are essentially saying this is about numbers, that a country with limited space has the right to, I guess, put the brakes on. How legitimate are those concerns? And I'm just reminded by what you were talking about a little bit earlier when you were mentioning policy failures to do with things like housing, for example.
Yeah, the question is, how can we address the issue with a bit more sophisticated measure than just bluntly limiting the entire population to a specific number? That has never been done by anyone. And frankly speaking, I think it's not a very good way in addressing this topic. Because it's really a specific number, and it doesn't account for what's happening if the population ages more, if the baby boomers all go into pension, then we're all of a sudden will lack skilled workers, and we're going to see how many we can recruit based on if this number would bind. But it would be certainly not the best idea just to tie your hands in any way, given a lot of different structural changes that we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years. And so I think it's not a very sophisticated way in addressing the problems ahead. And there might be certainly better ones that need to be discussed first. It's not there's no clear-cut solution out there.
What are some of those better, more sophisticated solutions?
One thing we also have to admit is that actually, from an economic point of view, Switzerland has actually done well with immigration from the EU. In terms of, the economy, a lot of firms actually, we have seen that and provided evidence for that with our research that has been published very well, that high-skilled firms and firms that need high-skilled workers benefited a lot from immigration from the European Union, because they were in the 90s, they were lacking in Switzerland, and firms, as a consequence of getting access to skilled workers, could start to expand. They became more innovative. They did more R&D, and they filed more patents. And that has all been very rigorous research showing this. So in a sense, we benefited a lot from immigration, and we also need to acknowledge this side of immigration. And yes, it also brought some problems, for instance, on the housing market. But this could also be due to missed changes and economic reforms there.
I'm interested, you were talking about Switzerland's benefited from access to skilled workers, and we know a lot of those workers are coming from other European countries because of what's known as freedom of movement, this agreement within the EU, although Switzerland is not part of the EU, but it does have that agreement with the European Union for freedom of movement. As I understand, the bloc is Switzerland's largest trading partner. So can Switzerland really afford to put that agreement of freedom of movement at risk?
No. The issue is also that this freedom of movement policy and agreement is connected to other bilateral agreement we have with the European Union. So it's not clear what would happen if Switzerland unilaterally would cancel the free movement of people policy. We could also be that our other bilateral agreements would go, and that could actually reverse things like we have seen in the UK, for instance, with the asylum process and other things that most of the people that actually advocate for this policy now would fear and not like. So it's actually paradoxical that we are now voting for something that might jeopardize these other agreements that are the very basis of what the same party members don't like.
Andreas, you were mentioning, of course, Switzerland's ageing population. That's something that many countries, they're grappling with. And it's a country, too, that relies on foreign workers to fill many jobs. We played some people who were supporting the referendum. Let's hear from some people now who are telling us why they're against it.
Yes, of course it worries me, because we have a lot of healthcare workers who come from abroad. So if they're only Swiss staff, it simply won't work. Our healthcare system is heading for disaster.
We clearly rely on foreign workers, and right now we're struggling. The situation is difficult. There are nursing homes with empty beds that cannot open, not because there's no demand, there's too much demand. Right now there are 240 people waiting for a place in the Lausanne region. There are beds available, but we cannot open them because we lack the staff. And the situation is just going to get worse because of the clear demographic trends in Switzerland. The baby boomer generation is aging, and they'll place a major burden on healthcare. The number of people over 85 is set to double.
Andreas, Beerli, just spell out for us, what will a population cap, mean for areas like Switzerland's aged care sector?
Yeah, it will be catastrophic. Certainly, we don't know what's gonna happen. We already have tight labor markets in these sectors, and we don't know what will happen if the free movement of people policy will be cancelled, or if we have to curb immigration in some other ways. Also, different sectors will be run against each other. Who has the right to actually recruit workers from abroad? And then certainly we're going to see missing workers in many areas where they will be needed. Yeah.
Andreas, I want to just ask you finally, you're an economist. Is there a tension between what economists say a country needs, like more workers, more people, and what some voters say they want, which is less of that?
To be honest, I think, it's important to acknowledge the concerns, and I also do share some of these concerns. It's quite hard to get a flat in Zurich, and it's sometimes hard to find space in areas, like at the lake or other places, and but you could also blame policy for not addressing these policies or these challenges in some other way. Of course, also it's important to, get on the table with the European Union and find solutions for making immigration in some way palatable, I would say, for both sides. Switzerland has a unique position here because the labor market is booming. We have very high wages, and it's very attractive to come here. And that also leads to a lot of immigration. And I think it's in the European Union's interest also to keep countries like Switzerland open and participating in this like single market. So I would say, yeah, but this particular referendum that we are now talking about is certainly not the right solution to address the topic. And it would be, we need more sophisticated solutions for this.
Economist Andreas Beerli speaking to us today from Zurich. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
So what do you think about this referendum in Switzerland? And if it was happening in your country, how would you vote? Let us know in the comments. We also have a lot more on the topic of migration and right-wing politics on our channel. I'm Jared Reid in Berlin. Take care.